Thank you. My name is Chris Walden. I'm the president of ASMAC, and this is our first ever town hall meeting. And this came about because of recent developments, which we'll delve into in a little bit. But first, let me tell you just a little bit about ASMAC in general for those who are not quite as familiar. ASMAC stands for American Society of Music Arrangers and Composers. And in 1938, a group of composers and arrangers writing music for movies being dissatisfied with a lack of appreciation for their efforts founded this organization. At that time, there were 8 major studios, and each studio had its own 35 to 50-piece staff orchestra on full employment. And one of ASMAC's goals at the time was to also be fully employed as an orchestrator. When they tried to get a royalty for the orchestrations, they were dismally bound for failure, a situation that still exists today, and which we're going to talk about a little bit as well. The membership has now of ASMAC grown to roughly 500, and goals and camaraderie, and also continuing to expand by welcoming members who are or have been active in the preparation of music for movies, theater, recording, television, and live performances. Through monthly luncheons, seminars, and masterclasses, and workshops, and on our own events, we strive to bring the long-term members into contact with students and young and upcoming professionals. ASMAC offers annual scholarships in both arranging and composing, and we also do a composing competition. And we annually recognize leaders in our field by presenting the Golden Score Award. So for today, I'm really excited to have a panel of illustrious speakers, all experts in their own fields today. And thank you all for coming. I'm going to just introduce everyone briefly. We'll start on the far stage right with Jay Cooper, attorney. He focuses his practice on music industry, motion picture, television, internet, multimedia, and intellectual property issues. He represents individuals and companies on intellectual property matters, including recording and publishing agreements for individual artists and composers, but also for actors, directors, producers, and also all entertainment issues relative to the internet. Welcome, Jay Cooper. Vince Mendoza, a composer and arranger, has been at the forefront of the jazz and contemporary music scene for the last 20 years. He has written scores and composition and arrangements for big bands, chamber and symphonic settings, and collaborated with greats like Joni Mitchell, Elvis Costello, Pat Metheny, and was the principal conductor of the Metropole Orchestra in Holland. And he won 6 Grammys, I believe.
Wow.
Vince Mendoza. Next to me, Julia Michels is a music supervisor, has spent over 2 decades working in the music industry, and has had great success in various roles throughout her storied career. She found her true calling working as an independent music supervisor. Together, Julia's box office hits have totaled nearly $2 billion in worldwide ticket sales. I wish some of it was yours.
Yeah.
She was recognized for 2 consecutive years with the award for Outstanding Music Supervision in Film by the Hollywood Music and Media, as well as Best Music Supervision in Film in 2011 and 12 by the Guild of Music Supervisors. She recently worked on movies such as Pitch for the Pitch Perfect series movies. Julia Michels. Next to me, Don Peake is a multi-talented musician who has worked as a guitarist, arranger, and record producer and film composer. Starting his professional musical career as a guitarist in 1961, Peake's talent was recognized early when he toured as lead guitarist with the Everly Brothers at the age of 21, playing in the US and Europe for 2 years. Peake returned to Los Angeles to establish himself as a recording musician and played for many of the legendary performers under Phil Spector's production, including the Righteous Brothers, You've Lost the Loving Feeling, Ike and Tina Turner, River Deep Mountain High, as well as recording with Mahalia Jackson, Billy Preston, Cannonball Adderley, Marvin Gaye, and Diana Ross. Don Peake. Richard Niles' career spans pop, R&B, rock, and jazz as a composer, producer, songwriter, arranger, conductor, broadcaster, recording artist, author, and educator. He has contributed to over 40 hits. Records featuring his work have sold more than 250 million copies worldwide. Credits include Paul McCartney, Ray Charles, Tina Turner, James Brown, Michael McDonald, Mariah Carey, Cher, Pat Metheny, Dusty Springfield, Jane Monheit, Kylie Minogue, Grace Jones, and Michel Legrand. Richard Niles.
And Richard Niles is the author of an amazing book, which is back on the back there. It's a gigantic book. He's looked into all of these different hit records. He has transcribed them. He's done a monumental bit of work, and anybody should have that book.
Yeah, it's a good book.
I'm only giving him 10%. I don't know what.
You said 15.
Oh.
And then also we're glad to have Jeffrey Weber, has been a widely recognized music industry professional for over 35 years. He has produced over 185 CDs with releases on just about every major label, as well as a host of independent labels. Along the way, his projects have yielded 2 Grammys, 7 Grammy nominations, at least 17 top 10 albums, 2 #1 albums, and an assortment of other honors. Jeffrey Weber.
Aren't you going to tell us about yourself?
As I said, I'm the president of ASMAC, and which keeps me pretty busy. And if I still find time to it, I get to my day job, which is being an arranger, and orchestrator, and composer. So, thank you. So I would like to start actually with Don. And as a session player, which you had lots of experience, sometimes it is required to, or it just happens that a session player actually comes up with melodic parts that will kind of be woven into the piece and actually will become a part of the composition, right?
Correct.
And there's actually one example, which are you famous for, which is the Marvin Gaye piece, "Let's Get It On." And if you could hear a little piece of that.
I just happen to have it with me.
Exactly. Then you guys, you all will see what we mean with that.
1972, I get a call from Ben Barrett at the beginning of the year. "Hey, Don, listen, Motown is moving from Detroit, and they want a band, and I want you to be a staff musician."
Louder.
I said, "Great. I love it." So I showed up, and Freddie Perrin called us over to his studio, and he had written out this incredible chart, and it was "I Want You Back," and it was and then David T comes in. So that was written out, and I read that, and Freddie Perrin had the bass an octave lower, and that was a hit record. It was a big hit for the Jackson 5. And then one day I went in there, and Marvin Gaye was there, and we started rehearsing this song. Renee Hall was the arranger. It was in E flat, and it was like a. So I wasn't playing the wah wah yet. It was like. And Renee says, "Why don't you make something up at the beginning?" So I did this.
I've been really trying, trying to hold back this feeling for so long. And if you feel like I feel, baby, then come on. Oh, come on. Woo. Let's get it on.
And Marvin saying, "Let's get it on." That's how that happened.
So that opening guitar lick is so recognizable as part of that song, which one usually would think it's part of the composition, right? Did you ever get co-composing credit for this?
No. And at that time, nor would you expect it.
Right.
At that point, you were a hired gun, and you went in there, and Sometimes it was a chord chart. It was a C chord with 4 slashes,
Mm-hmm.
and then an F chord with 4 slashes, and you made up your part. And sometimes, like on I Want You Back, Freddie Perrin had written this wonderful bass line, which we played, and I read that. So, but I had no expectation. But now Jay Cooper and I, I'm making a joke, but it would be very nice to get a retroactive compensation for that lick, because it is now with this new court decision that Richard is going to talk about. What I did is part of that song.
It is, and this is just one of many examples where in the studio the session musicians comes up with a line that's actually not written. He just comes up as it goes. And I think there was one case, a lawsuit, with a saxophone player, I forgot his name, played this intro line to Baker Street, or what was it called? Do you
Yes,
remember?
Baker Street.
Baker Street.
Yeah.
Dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-da.
Yeah. It was Ralph Ravenscroft, wasn't it? I think it was, yes.
Yeah, and same thing. He was just called as a session musician and never was compensated. Did you know this? Did he ever win something?
No,
out
he
of
never
it?
won anything, and that's a pretty obvious case where it's a
Yeah.
main melody that's played, which is considered to be part of the tune. But there are a lot of other examples of that, of studio musicians coming up with stuff, and of course, arrangers are studio musicians,
Yeah.
and so we arrangers have often been faced with a song and there's 4 blank bars where nothing's happening. So we'll think of some cool melody for that. We will compose that melody, and that melody may well become
Right.
the hook of the song. I always use the example of this, of a song like Dancing in the Street. Now, the beginning of Dancing in the Street, you hear this brass line that goes, ba-ba-ba-da-da-ba. Sorry about my singing. But that happens before you even hear the song. You hear that melody, and it's the hook that drives you, it pulls you into the melody. But Paul Reiser was only given an arranging fee of, I think, $15 for doing that, and yet it's the hook of the song. And there's so many other examples of that. I think the overall point about this is that both studio musicians, when they come up with important melodies, and arrangers, of course, are involved in the act of co-composition. And there's no question of that. That's just a musical fact.
Right.
But up until now, that has not been relevant, because it's always been expected that, it's always been said that the arrangement and everything that is played on a recording session is the legal property of the publisher and the songwriter, up until now. And that is why this court case is so important, because the judge who made this decision absolutely changed the goalposts for all of
Right.
us.
And
And the implications for that are massive.
Yeah, and we're going to get to that in a
Okay,
minute.
fine, sorry, I'm rushing. There's also the other example, though, if I might
Sure.
just use this other thing, about Sting and Every Breath We Take,
Yeah.
Every Breath You Take. Andy Summers is extremely upset about the fact that his actual guitar arrangement for it, number one, made the song a hit, because they were trying to record the song for a long time and failing until he came up with that idea of how to arrange it. But then his guitar part was used by Puff Daddy, if I may call him that, and on a song called supposedly Missing You. And none of Sting's melody and none of Sting's lyrics were used, and yet Sting got all the royalties for it.
But it was just that guitar lick.
It was the only thing that
Exactly.
was used was Andy Summers' guitar, and you know Andy, John, so you know that he is very upset about this, and quite rightly too. He called it the biggest ripoff of all time.
Yeah.
So these things have to be addressed now because of the court case.
Which brings me to my next question for Don, actually. Do you know if ever your guitar lick for that Marvin Gaye song being used without the rest of the song, just that lick?
Yes, I have heard it being sampled
Right.
and used in loops. Also, a lot of the Motown stuff that we recorded, where there was what we called a breakdown. Excuse me, where the song would be going dang a dang a dang, and then suddenly it'd go pop, and Bobby Hall would go boom, ta-pat, do ta-pat, and then the bass would come in, and they would
Right.
grab that little bit and loop that. But that, those were people making up stuff. And I want to also point out in Bobby Darin's If I Were a Carpenter, and I was the arranger on that, and I did the string parts, And later on, Bobby was on stage, and he performed the song and just had a rhythm section, and he sang my string part as part of the song, which I was deeply touched by. But there again, dee dee da doo dee.
Right. Which becomes part of the composition, yeah.
Sound good, huh?
Yeah.
Wish I could say the same for you.
I know.
So
Me too.
whenever that guitar bit was used, were you ever contacted or asked for permission or anything? Just
No. As a matter of fact, Motown left my name off the record at first because I was the white boy.
oh, I see.
And the original release of Let's Get It On did not have my name on it. And Marvin, I only met Marvin Gaye that one day for those hours.
Yeah.
We did
On
3
that session.
songs. One of them was If I Should Die Tonight, and I forgot the third song. But Marvin went on the road, and he had his own band, of course, and Wah-Wah Watson was playing guitar, and everybody assumed Wah-Wah had made the record. Later on, about 10 years ago, I got a call from Motown, and they said, Don, we looked at the contract, and it's you, and we're on the new release. Your name is now on it.
Right.
And that and 60 cents will get you a cup of coffee
Yeah.
at McDonald's.
Yes. And of course, David Vanderpit was the first arranger to ever get credit on a Motown record, only because Marvin Gaye insisted on it.
Yeah. Jay Cooper, I would like to ask you, did you ever, in your work as representing composers, did you ever represent arrangers or orchestrators?
No, composers.
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 What is your take on the recent Marvin Gaye, Robin Thicke, Pharrell Williams case?
There's a lot of noise. First of all, that case is not precedent for anything. It's a jury decision. It's not even a judge decision. It's a jury decision. I believe that the jury was instructed wrongly, and I'm going to take a guess that probably will be overturned on appeal. Do remember, lower court decisions are not precedent. They're not precedent for anything. There has to be an appellate decision to make precedent of what it is. That was a factual case, and I think that the jury was probably instructed wrong. Remember that there is no copyright on a feel of something or a style. There's no copyright on style. There's no copyright on feel. There's copyright on the musical content. That's where there's copyright. So I don't think, a lot of people are upset about the case and worried about the case. It's not precedent for anything. The law has not changed. That case has not changed the law. The law is what it has been. And I think it was badly handled in that case, very much so. So I'm not as worried about that case. As I say, it doesn't say anything. Some points that were raised about the guitar parts and the things that were added and all that, very good points, but let me point out something. The law is as follows. If 4 people go into a room and a song comes out, the law says all 4 are the co-copyright owners, unless there is an agreement to the contrary. That is what the law is. So if the drummer is in there and he hits a few bass notes and things of that nature, he's still a co-copyright owner of that song, unless there is an agreement to the contrary. And the problem has been that historically, that great musicians go into these sessions and they're there understanding that they're being paid for the session, understanding that they're contributing to the arrangement, they're contributing to the orchestration or what have you, but they go in understanding that they're not a copyright owner. If they were to go in and say, to the extent that I contribute something, I'm entitled to a share. I go through this all the time with groups fighting amongst themselves. Well, I contributed this, I contributed that, I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. And they fight, and eventually, at least the general rock and roll groups over the years and the groups of today, they come out with an understanding of who owns what. Problem is with great session musicians, as you have here, as Don is and the rest here, great session musicians, we're used to a different mentality. And they never went in, and maybe they wouldn't have got the job if they went in and said it, but they never went in and said, I'm entitled to something for it. They are entitled to something for it. Not legally, unless they have come to an agreement. And that's what the problem, that's where the really serious problem is.
Well, that's good to know because as the verdict became public, a lot of people were scratching their heads about the verdict itself. And but then the implication of what lots of people were worried about is, what does that mean? Does that have any precedent? And
It does not have, precedent is something that, a decision by an appellate court or Supreme Court, that is precedent. This case is not precedent for everything. It's created a lot of noise and may give a lot of people the incentive to file actions on something of that nature. I tell you, every time I have a client of mine has a hit, somebody wants to file a lawsuit. We call it, if there's a hit, there's a writ, right? It's on a constant basis. I'll tell you one of my favorite stories, is an absolute true story. Years ago, I was representing, I love this story, Lionel Richie. And he wrote a song called Hello. We got, hello, we got 5 different people filed lawsuits. 5 different people claimed it. And Lionel came up with a great line. I'll never forget this line. Why can't we have them sue each other and then the winner gets to sue?
That's brilliant. That's awesome.
The other one, and as I've got a collection of these claim letters on infringements. I'm telling you, it's incredible what you get. People claim they wrote the entire catalog of whoever all the time. I had one that I represent Sheryl Crow and have for many years. Somebody wrote in letters that claimed they wrote every song that she wrote. Right. Another one of my favorite stories, and I love this story, is also a Lionel Richie song. I got a call one day, and the guy said, Lionel wrote this song, Wandering Stranger. I said, yes, that's right. What do you want? He says, well, I'm going to sue. And I said, you're going to sue? Why are you going to sue? And he said, because I'm that stranger.
very good one.
Anyway, yes, it's constant. You're constantly badgered with claims that they wrote something, they wrote this, they wrote that. But as I say, this case is not precedent. It's created a lot of noise, but the law hasn't changed. The law hasn't changed. You still have to copy. You still have to have infringed or copy a substantial portion of a copyrightable item. I don't see any copyrightable item that was infringed in this particular case. And the copyrightable item would be the music and the lyrics. And it's certainly not a field.
Of the melody and the chord changes.
I'm sorry, what?
And the music consisting of the melody and the chord changes, and not just of use of a cowbell.
Right, correct.
Well,
that is correct.
If I may, I'll ask a specific question to you about this. You first of all said that there is an understanding to the contrary, if there's an understanding. So when a group of session musicians walk into a studio, where is the understanding that they have no right to their own composing? Where is the understanding where...
Yeah, fair question. The understanding is in the fact that a high percentage of sessions, not necessarily in Detroit, but high sessions here in New York have been union sessions. You sign a union contract. That's an employment contract. In an employment contract, you're giving up all your rights. I'm not saying it's right. But if you're going to contribute a major, as Don has, major portions to work, you got to say, wait a minute, I'm also a composer here. And you got to raise that yourself, because if you don't raise it, they are assuming that you have waived that.
Well, assumptions are not necessarily a legal document.
No.
What I'm asking is, when I've been working for 40 years as an arranger, and I've never signed any union documents that say I waive all my rights as a composer.
Well, that's a difference between being called as an arranger or being called as a session musician in Don's case.
Well, actually, there is no difference whatsoever. A studio musician comes in and composes on his instrument something, and an arranger walks in with a score.
Let me explain the arrangement. Under the Copyright Act, Section 101, 102, and 103, and 106, under the Copyright Act, An arrangement is defined as a derivative work. The copyright owner of the song owns the derivative work. And if anybody wants to do a derivative work, and an arrangement is defined in the Copyright Act as a derivative work. And people all the time, a film is a derivative work of a book. A video is a derivative work of a song. So those are derivative works. In order to do a derivative work properly, you get a license from the owner of the song, and then you own the copyright in the derivative work. So if I'm doing a movie and I'm going to do it of a book, I enter into a license agreement for the book. The film becomes a derivative work. Now I own that film. But if I go ahead and film the story from the book but don't get a right from it, I don't have a right to that film. I could be sued. So the same issues here. Your arrangement is a derivative work of the song. And what you need in order to own that arrangement separate and apart is to get a license agreement from the song. And that's what the problem is, and that's what the issue is. And most arrangers are doing their job. Nelson Riddle and Billy May, et cetera. They did their job, and they never asked for royalties for their arrangement or anything else like that. That's a crime, in my feeling, that the arrangers didn't stand up a long time ago. Those Sinatra recordings with the arrangements of Billy May and Nelson Riddle, et cetera, were incredible. Those made those tracks. And yeah, they were entitled to, I felt they were entitled to it. Did they ever ask? Probably never. But do remember, an arrangement is a derivative work of a copyright. And the derivative, one who controls the derivative is the owner of the original copyright.
And in the current copyright law, derivative copyright is mentioned in what form?
It's mentioned in section 101, 102, and 106.
Well, I think there are also two ways of looking at this. You can look at it in terms of the letter of the law, and then you can look at it, if you have any morals, as a matter of right or wrong. I mean, if somebody comes in with a song like Baker Street and composes a major melody, which is used on the recording and becomes part of that recording, and the song is a hit, I would say it would be a moral obligation, not that has anything whatsoever to do with the law or politics. Or reality. But nevertheless, I hate to say it, but we're all human beings. And at some point, we have to kind of acknowledge that if somebody does something, there is a question of right or wrong. How long can we go on looking at somebody like Vince, for instance, who does such marvelous work? And you know, if you want to go back to Nelson Riddle, sure. His arrangement of I Get Along Without You Very Well is a superb, brilliant composition in its own right, which deserved financial remuneration from a moral point of view and also a factual point of view. When people compose, you know, copyright was considered to be melody and lyric. Well, if somebody composes an important melody, like for instance the whistling in a certain Monty Python song, those things deserve to be, they are co-compositions. So when is the law going to turn around and say that we should change the law to make the music business actually more fair and more moral?
Well, you're right. I mean, I can't argue with the morality of it. You're absolutely 100% right. But changing the law, the copyright law, you have, let's see, the last Copyright Act was 1976. It took, the one before that was 1909. It took 25 years to make a new copyright law in 1976. Finally, in 1995, we got the law changed to deal with digital. We have so many problems since 1995 because the world changed in the year 2000. In the year 2000, a 19-year-old by the name of Sean Fanning came along, and showed you what people can do with a digital product like a CD, okay? The world changed, and the record industry went down from $40 billion worldwide to a $15 billion worldwide business. Dramatic, and we've been trying, a whole group of us, there's a lot of people involved in this, are trying to get changes to copyright legislation in Congress, trying to get changes in there to deal with these issues, which are many. I could go through a whole litany of issues on this thing. And let me tell you, it's almost impossible. I just came back from Washington. There was a whole number of us in Washington trying to talk to the senators and congressmen. It's like talking to this wall. There are maybe 3 people in Congress who understand it. We lost a great one last year who was voted out, unfortunately, Howard Berman, who really understood these issues. He was the head of the intellectual committee in the House. And very few people there do understand this. For instance, right now, we've been fighting for years. I'll give you some example of what the fight is. This would be only one of them. Pre-72 recordings. Since they were not protected by federal copyright law, most of the music services are refusing to pay for the performance of the pre-72 recordings. Okay, that needs to be changed dramatically. Radio does not pay for artists and the record companies for the airing of the recordings. They do not pay. They pay the songwriter and publisher, but they don't pay. We are one of three countries around the world that doesn't. The others are Iran and North Korea.
Perfect.
That's the company we keep, and that's another $300 to $400 million not coming into our recording artists because of that. I can go on and on with the issues that we have in Congress. The range of things is another one, of course. And you're right. I can't argue with it. You're right morally. And how about Louis Prima, and how about Sam Butera and all those great saxophone things he did with Louis Prima and Keely Smith that was on those recordings? Don't you think he was entitled to something? I do. And how about the saxophone player who died recently with Bruce Springsteen? He was incredible, the things that he put on Bruce's recordings. Shouldn't he get something on that? There's a lot of wrongs right now going on, and the arranger thing is another one.
The problem we have with attempts to changing the copyright law is that there are other people who want to have the copyright law changed as well, but not for the better in our sense, because the Googles and the Microsofts of the world and Eric Schmidt from Google, they already threatened they want to change the copyright law, but they want to make it looser and not tighter. So that's what we're facing as well, since we had the Grammys on the Hill a few days ago where we all were in Washington, D.C. and lobbying with congressmen for exactly what you said, the Radio Performance Rights Act, but also in getting copyright law reviewed is not a hopeless cause, but it's a really difficult cause because they're pulling at the copyright law from different directions.
Well, give you an example of Google. A law was proposed, a bipartisan law was proposed in Congress about 2 years ago. It was called SOPA, Stop Online Piracy Act. Republicans were for it, the Democrats were for it. What the law did was to basically shut down foreign websites that were dealing primarily in illegal content. That was the law. Google mounted a campaign that was incredible. Millions of letters and emails were flooded into Congress because they riled up the public and they said they're taking away your free speech. They're taking away your free speech. And everybody started writing to Congress and the bill died. The bill died. That's part of what we're fighting, and he's absolutely right. That's where we're fighting.
The consequence from SOPA tanking, that if we now as holders of intellectual property, if we're now approaching congressmen about something like this, they all have bad memories from that SOPA catastrophe. Yeah. So they're really weary about anything that has anything to do with that, because SOPA, they kind of took so much heat for the whole SOPA thing, which initially was a good bill. But yeah, we have a question and answer. a Q&A at the very end, but let's just, since John, you were raising your hand a couple of times.
It's just a quick point within this about what we were just saying. There's an election going on in the United Kingdom at the moment. One of the parties is the Green Party, which many people have sympathy for. Part of their manifesto is to try to reduce copyright to 14 years. That is written in their manifesto.
14
14
instead of 70.
instead of 70. Because they said everybody should be entitled to download things and freedom. So it's exactly what you're saying, but it's going even further
Yep.
into stuff that's going to affect us terribly. Major British political parties.
We have this. We have that. We have that in this country too. There's major forces. We call them the copy left forces. Major forces who want to reduce the length of copyright. Don't believe in copyright, or absolutely anti-copyright. Thinks that copyright is dead. And let me tell you, I do a lot of lectures at universities around, and in law schools, and recently at Berkeley and at Stanford, I'm talking to some of the brightest young people coming up as lawyers. They don't believe in copyright. They don't believe in copyright, and because it benefits the tech companies in a whole lot of ways. The more content they have on our legal or otherwise, the more subscriptions they have, and the more advertising they sell. So they cooperate a little bit, but not enough. I'll give you another example. Absolutely, I go through this all the time. There's a section of the Copyright Act called Section 512, the safe harbor provisions. Now this safe harbor provisions were campaigned for when the Copyright Act was changed in the 90s, in 95, which basically says that an internet service provider, ISP, or a mobile service provider, if there is illegal content flowing through them, they're not responsible for copyright infringement unless they know what's on there. That's what Section 512 says. So what you have to do when you know you have illegal content on there, you have to send a letter under oath saying you have illegal content on there, you must take it down. So then they take it down. And guess what? Next day, it's back up. It is back up the very next day. So you have to keep sending these letters. They know what's on there. There's a provision in there that says if they know or should know that they have illegal content and they don't do anything about it, then they are responsible. But all the cases so far have said basically they don't know what's on there. They don't know what's on there. All the legal decisions so far.
All right.
And so we have this problem of being unable to control our content. Unable. And the people who could control this content, the mobile service providers or the internet service providers, are not doing anything about it. They're not doing anything about it because it makes them money to have it on there.
It's a
Could
very
I just
good
ask
point.
one small question on what you said earlier about not this decision not being precedent? You said that if it went to the appellate court and it was upheld, would it then be considered to be a precedent?
It depends upon how it's written or what is written. In other words, what is written will determine. And there's all kinds of things that could happen. They could send it back. They could send it back to the lower court. They could they could render a decision any way possible. Yes, it could be at that particular point. My guess is that this was all about jury instruction, and rather than a court saying that the style and feel, the copy of a style and feel is copyright infringement. Because it's clear, I listened to both the tracks, it's clear that the melody and the lyrics are not similar.
Absolutely. But that's the whole point that we're making, is that what was considered to be infringed was the rhythm section, the arrangement of the song.
Right.
So I'm just asking, nobody expected this case to end up the way it ended up. All the best minds that I listen
Oh,
to.
somebody expected it, the lawyer on the other side.
The lawyer on the, yes, exactly, I agree. But everyone
Absolutely.
who I heard being interviewed about it, I'm sure you heard it too, said, no, this is going to be thrown out, it's nonsense.
But the whole situation is twofold. It means what the outcome of the lawsuit means for that particular case. And the second part is what the outcome of this case means for everyone else. And as Jay just mentioned about the president, if it does set a precedent or not. But I would like to, coming back to our arrangers issues, and would like to hear from someone more about the practical use and in that kind of field. And I would like to hear from Julia. First of all, do you ever, when in your role as a music supervisor, you obviously work closely with the composer, and in licensing songs you work with whoever supplies the songs. But do you ever get to work more or less closely with the arranger or orchestrator?
Hi, everybody. It's a good question. I mean, there's two sides of what I do. I deal on the composer side, and then I deal on the song side. On the song side, I mostly deal with songwriters if I'm going to get a new song. I mean, I call songwriters and ask them if they'll write something for a scene, or I show them footage. So if they have their own arrangers, I don't usually talk to their arrangers, mostly the main songwriter. On the composer side, I do deal with arrangers and orchestrators very often. In fact, they're some of my favorite people. I love that process. I don't get to do that much. It's mostly songs, but I love dealing on the composer side. And mostly for me, my main contact on the whole process of writing a score, besides the composer, is my music editor. So I'm really dealing with my music editor to communicate with the composer, and the orchestrator too. I mean, it just depends on the composer and how they work. But I'm not creatively working with arrangers and orchestrators as I am with songwriters on the song side and the actual composer on the score side.
But let me ask you this: does it ever occur that you are licensing a song for a movie, but just the song and not the master recording, and you commission a new master recording of an existing song?
All the time. I mean, all the time. I mean, you're basically covers. So
Yeah,
you're saying,
exactly,
like
basically covers.
Pitch Perfect, a
Exactly.
cappella covers a whole movie.
So, and when you're commissioning a new master recording of that song, how much of that arrangement in your experience is being copied as well?
Okay, take back what I said, because all I do is work with the arrangers on Pitch Perfect. Okay, so yeah, that's a different example. So on Pitch Perfect, there's 4 arrangers. It's a huge music process, and they're arranging the compositions for a cappella.
Right.
We don't, it's never come up that there's something off or not right, or do we need to get permission for this or not permission? Because we go to the publishing companies, we say, can we have permission to license, Bruno Mars for a cappella arrangement? They give us a quote. Kind of end of story. But the arrangements are being completely new derivative works that we're doing of the person that's giving us the license.
Right. But for example, if you would, for example, commission a re-record of this Marvin Gaye song where Don played the guitar riff, you would also want to hear that guitar riff in
100%.
right?
In a cappella, yes, everything is, yes.
Exactly.
So we've got, yeah, absolutely. Someone's doing the guitar, someone's doing the bass, someone's doing the cowbell. Yes, it's all done by voices. We're absolutely using his part.
Exactly. So
100%.
from your point of view, as someone who licenses and uses that music, for you it is actually an integral part of the composition.
Oh, 100%.
Exactly.
Because that song is not that song without that part.
Yeah. Perfect.
In fact, I remember we got an arrangement in, and Mike Knobloch, who's the head of Universal, said, it was a Muse song. I think he said, where's the guitar part? That's my favorite part. I want that in the arrangement. And we put it back in.
That's a very good point.
So
And I'm
he
glad
was missing that point, which made the whole song.
Yeah. And I'm glad that you're pointing that out, and that for you it actually is important and it's an integral part. When on the score side, Julia, when you're working with a music editor who obviously tempts the scenes with with an existing score. Very often these days we find ourselves that when a score is very successful and has where we get back to what Jay said, the feel thing that you can actually not protect. But a good example was Thomas Newman's score to American Beauty.
Yes.
Had that marimba ostinato thing. So when when that was his original score was used to temp a scene, you would suddenly hear that influence, not the melody and the chords, but that feel of
Yes.
the ostinato marimba. That feel would go into that new score piece.
We would make them take it out,
You make it take it out.
100%.
Yeah.
I mean, many, many situations. I don't even want to really name but where the director loves the feel of the piece and the composer has gotten too close, not by the composer's fault, because the directors asked them to get close, and we as the supervisors and the studio will come in and say, either we license the piece of music that was temped, which no one ever wants to do, or you need to change it. It happens all the time.
And go far enough away from it.
And I've actually even got on the scoring stage where we all go, oh my God, that sounds like, how did that miss us in all of our, and then we have to make changes.
Right.
You guys are probably part of those changes, and but that's happened too.
But to be clear, that was even though if the feel was too close, right?
Yes.
Not if the melody was.
Yeah,
not.
yes, if the feel was too close. And you get, there's two scenarios. One is the feel close and are we uncomfortable with the feel? And then there's times when we've actually sent it to a musicologist because there's been such a debate, the director wants that,
Right.
and they say, it's not similar, this will stand up in court, and we go forward with it. But to get to that point where we're sending to a musicologist, it's probably been a little bit of a back and forth, what can you change, what can you make different, because the feel is the same. But if a musicologist rules and the studio is happy with the ruling, we'll go forward, because we're protected.
Do you feel that this outcome of the case has any effect on your work? I mean, will you, as a music supervisor going forward, act differently, or does it influence at all the decisions you were making?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, for me, I that's all I can do is operate on feel. If I, so we're all trying to replace songs we can't afford, Beyonce and Jay-Z and all these songs that we just don't have music budgets for most of the time. And there are songwriters we'll go to, or libraries even, not even known songwriters, and say, all right, I need to replace, Katy Perry's Roar. Can you send me some ideas? And there are some that get a little too close. And when they get close, even before this ruling, I say, you need to change this, or I send it to my counterpart, or I send it around. What do you guys think? So I was doing that anyway. It's too nerve-wracking, and there's too much riding on the fact of a copyright. And, heads of studios will even point out things, licensing heads, maybe something I haven't even heard. And they'll say, that sounds a little too, and I go, really, it does? And then we A/B things, and we'll put it up in Pro Tools. I mean, it's a whole thing. But I do that, I was doing that anyway, because that does scare me. So I don't know if people will probably be a little more with their ears pricked up, I would say, for sure.
There's no copyright in the samba. There's no copyright in the tango. Western music, that was all the Western films, has a feel. There's no copyright in those things. And a lot of people wrote Western music. A lot of people have written sambas. A lot of people have written tangos and all that. So, and the same with in rock and roll feeling or rap music. There's a general feel. Otherwise, it's not rap music if you don't copy that feel.
Yeah, very good point. Vince, I would like to ask you, your contributions as an arranger, since are exceptional creative, I must say, and because the way how you write, so that probably in many cases of your work, the arrangement becomes an integral part of the composition. Were you ever be compensated for beyond the arrangement, or?
Well, before I go into that, maybe I should take it, speaking to, there were so many things that were said in the last, how long we've been here? And, but I want to just speak to one thing in particular.
Sure, go ahead.
And maybe, we could all close our eyes and imagine being in the room with Nelson Riddle and Frank, and Nelson is asking Frank, tells Frank that he has a moral responsibility to pay him something for the arrangement.
Exactly right.
And Frank says, see that guy over there? His name is Guido. Go talk to him.
I never said I was being realistic.
Actually, his name was Jilly, if you remember.
Yes, I do remember that.
It was
yeah.
Jilly.
Okay, so that's when you think about, yes, the moral responsibility, yeah, but when we go into if you're talking about consensus and yes, absolutely, when you go in there, if you are expecting that you're going to become an integral part of the operation and you want to ask the songwriter, producer, film company, whatever, publisher, for a portion of the song, then you do it going in. If you're a guitar player, trumpet player,
Right.
saxophone, you do it going in. But I can expect that 99% of the time, even after my 60 years in the business, that if I ask that question, I'm going to be home watching Oprah Winfrey tomorrow. Because it's just not, in my experience, part of the, and we all know this in the audience, all of the heavyweights sitting watching me, you should be up here. But I just know that our experience is that we don't expect that going in. And if you do expect that, then maybe you should be the songwriter, because the songwriter has the control, and ultimately the publisher has the control. And when you're the arranger, you make guarantees to the publisher that you have no claim on the song, and the publisher guarantees to the supervisor that there are no outstanding claims and that she could do whatever she wants with the song. And to the extent that you put anything extra in the song, then it becomes part of the derivative work. And of course, the original song is not part of the derivative work, if I'm not mistaken. It's only the new elements that you put into it. But all of that stuff has to be taken care of ahead of time. And I'm actually not sure what the question was.
That's all right. That's all
What
right.
do you do for a living?
But after having said all that, was there ever a situation where your contribution was valued as more than the arrangement?
Only in a intrinsic sort of way. I
Right.
think that when people hear the work that I do, and again, this speaks to something that Don said, that rightly so, when an artist chooses to repeat a portion of the arrangement that he or she sees as part of the fabric of the song, it's a very moving thing. And just to the law is concrete, the finances are concrete. Yes, you got to have your contract stuff together and you take your chances. But I can remember as early as 8 years old listening to the radio, thinking, man, I would love to write string charts for Aretha. Really? Oh, I wish I wrote that lick. And so when I get to the point, if I ever get to that point, where I'm writing something for Aretha, and I get to write that lick that everybody sings when that record comes out, then in my heart I feel that I've accomplished what I've always wanted to do. And that has nothing to do with the finances. It has nothing to do with the legal part. Nobody has control over that except me. And that that's why I'm in this business. And that's why I opt to arrange somebody's song, because I think I have something to say to it.
Right.
About it, and if I don't, then I don't take it and I do something else.
Right.
But it's a very slippery slope that we're getting into now. With if you really want to be a part of the piece of the song, then you have to be in there from the beginning, and that also applies to the wonderful studio musicians that go in and play films for film composers that say, play something exciting here. And then film, music by, fill in the blank. And it's not fair morally to the musician, but that's really part of our responsibility as a musician. Why do you want to be a guitar player anyway? Because you want to play something cool on somebody's record.
I just want to say one quick thing. Mike Lang knows a lot about being asked to make something exciting and then find someone else's name on the screen.
Right.
But I want to tell you the opposite story.
Okay.
Barry White. I'm playing on all the tracks. We're making hit records. Ecstasy, When You're Next to Me, all these. I started arranging for Love Unlimited Orchestra. I had an idea for a song. And I got on my keyboard and I played a part. I write this song. And I called it Rhapsody of Love. And I played the keyboard part like I knew Barry would play it. And I brought it to him, and he said, Don, this is going to be a very important copyright. And we went into we made the tracks. 2 weeks later, I had 52 strings. It was a sea of toupees. That's an Artie Butler line, actually. And so now we're recording this. It's my piece. Oh my God! And everybody's playing, and I'm conducting. Finally, we finished the take, and I stepped down from the podium, and standing next to me is a gentleman named Tony. I won't say his last name, but you all know it. And he says, "Hey, Don," he's Italian, Sicilian actually. "Barry wants to talk to you in the booth." I said, "Well, what's it about?" He said, "Barry wants half the song." And I was young, and I was stupid, and I was hasty. I should have said, "I have to go to the bathroom right now," or "I have left my car running," but I didn't. I went in the booth, and there was Barry, and there was the engineer, and they're both gone now. And Barry says, "Hey, did Tony talk to you?" By the way, no one has ever heard this story, what I'm telling you. And Barry said, "Well, did Tony talk to you?" And I said, "Yeah." And this is where I put my size 12 in my mouth. And Barry said, "Well, what do you think?" And I said, "Well, I think it'd be okay as long as my name is before yours." And you could see the curtain coming down in front of his eyes. I never worked for Barry White again. The song was put on the shelf. They're looking for it right now. There's a 24 track somewhere. But the song was aced. I was gone. And it was, I should have said, I hear my mother calling. I got to go answer the phone, whatever. But I spoke hastily. Half of that copyright would have been very nice. Instead, there's no copyright.
Wow, that's quite a story.
Yeah. And there are a lot of stories like that, Don. And a lot of people have been in that exact situation.
Very common story.
Jeff, I would like to ask you, when you as a producer, when you work with arrangers, and is there ever a case where you feel that an arranger has contributed more than the arrangement?
All the time.
And how do you usually go about this?
Well,
Just tell a little bit about how you work and how this process for you works.
my process might be a little bit different than others because I like to capture a performance rather than manufacture one. So most, if not all, my recordings are either live to 2 tracks with no mixing, editing, or overdubbing, or live to multi-tracks. So as a producer, we're very invested in instructions to the arranger, and we get very, very deep into stylistic moments, emotional beats, things like that that are critical to an effective song because we don't have the option of after-the-fact decisions. Everything that we do ahead of time, and the recording is the period at the end of the sentence rather than the capital letter at the beginning. So what we try to do is then, I'm pretty much the luckiest guy on the planet in the fact that I work with so many incredible arrangers. When they turn in the arrangement, part 2 of my luck comes into play because I hire the best musicians on the planet. And in order for them not to be bored, because most great musicians can play any type of music with their eyes open or shut or behind their back or whatever, I bring the chart to them and I say, here's the chart. Please don't play this unless you feel compelled. Because in order to get them interested, I want them to contribute what they do best. Why would I hire them just to play the ink? If it wasn't for the fact that they were there and they actually have a wealth of knowledge that is so superior to mine, why not take advantage of it because I'm paying them anyway? My philosophy, of course, is as producer to be the weakest link on the recording and at the end of the day, take all the credit. And it's worked pretty well for me.
Bravo.
I just want to tell a quick story. I think Mike Lang was at this session. There was a huge orchestra, maybe 102, and they were doing a film, and the composers learned to have eyes in the back of their head because they're always watching the booth to see what they're doing back there while you're conducting. And suddenly, the door opens, and the producer and the director come out and approach the composer who's up on the podium, and the producer says to the composer, "The director wants it more orange." That's
lots of those stories.
Yeah.
In speaking to what some of the other panelists says about the instrumentalists requesting ownership interest in the song, while it may not be the case with instrumentalists, there is a story on one of my records. Rather than have a saxophone solo or a guitar solo or something like that, I opted to create a sympathetic rap. In other words, when I say sympathetic, I mean a rap that was written sympathetically to the lyric, and I called MC Light. For those of you, she's a terrific artist in her own right as a rapper. And we talked about the rap, even though it was 20 seconds long. She immediately understood the nature of what she was trying to do and requested an equity position in that song. And she was entitled to it and got it.
Or she asked.
Correct.
She did ask, yeah. Richard, since we just heard Jay saying whatever the outcome of that verdict in that specific case was, Jay doesn't think it doesn't have any precedent, but do you think differently, right?
No, I don't know legally. That's why it's so great that Jay is here.
Right.
Because, I'm not a lawyer and I don't know anything about how it's actually going to pan out legally. But I know that that's why I asked the question, if it goes to the appellate court, there is a chance that this could become precedent. I do know that there's a lot of discussion, a lot of worry amongst producers, amongst songwriters and publishers that there will be more lawsuits. And what I hope that this does is open up a discussion about the subject, and number two, open up an awareness of the work that arrangers do. Because, I've been in the situation where I arranged a song years ago called Breakout for a group called Swing Out Sister. My brass line was the lick of the song, the catchy lick. It didn't even have a hook. I asked for a piece of the action, and I never worked for them again. I mean, that's definitely the situation. And Vince is absolutely right. You go in sort of knowing that that's a situation, but occasionally you write something you think, well, actually, that's a really important melodic thing that I've just added to this. And without it, Swing Out Sister go all over the world playing this song, which was a #1 hit worldwide.
Right.
And every time they do it on stage, they play my brass lick. And the whole brass arrangement. They reproduce it either on a synthesizer or they take horn players with them. So, is this a right thing? I don't think it's right. And that's what I'm hoping for, is that people become aware of what arrangers do and see that it occasionally, not always, and I'm sure Vince will bear me out on this, sometimes you do something and you have enhanced the song. But sometimes it crosses over the line into what I would call co-composition. And in those cases, I think the arranger deserves a co-compositional role. When I was fortunate enough to work with James Brown, I talked to him about Fred Wesley and Pee Wee Ellis, and he gave them co-songwriter credit on a lot of his songs. And he said to me, of course I gave them co-songwriter credit. I didn't write those horn lines.
Wow.
That's what he said to me. He was a really, he had a lot of talk about him, but he was a straight-ahead guy.
Right.
And so I would hope that in the future, more songwriters have that attitude that, hey, this guy is contributing something else that I didn't have before that's an important part of this composition. And hopefully more people will be aware of it just because of, this meeting is going to go worldwide, I'm sure. And, so I'm just hoping that this opens up an awareness.
As many of you know, I'm originally from Germany, and before coming here and joining ASCAP, I was a member of the German Performing Rights Society, GEMA. And there's there's one particular little difference between how GEMA goes about arranging royalties than here in the US and other countries, is that in their distribution plan, the composer has the option to, on the cue sheet or on the registration of a song, to include an arranger, and that arranger, if an arranger for the first time arranges a song, the composer has the option put down an arranger on the registration sheet, and that arranger would get 1/12 of the royalty automatically, and no matter what version's ever going to be played with. So
There's a wrinkle in that plan, though, right?
what do you mean with the wrinkle?
Well, the thing is that with GEMA and BUMA and all the European societies, that 12% has to come from somewhere.
It comes out of the composers.
Right, but the composer has to agree in
Yes.
writing to give you the permission to collect that 12%.
Yes, it has. Yeah, the composer has to approve it.
Yes, so
It comes
always
out of the
work with
composer's
your friends.
And it's, there it's just like that set rate of 1/12, and here a composer potentially would have the same option of just calling this arranger a co-composer at whatever percentage rate, at whatever.
Let me
he
ask you a
chooses.
question about
Yes.
that. It's interesting. Let's say the arranger of this particular arrangement got the 12th. The songwriter said, good, he's entitled to it. Now somebody else comes along and records that song, but doesn't even touch that arrangement, doesn't even
Then
use
he's
those
still
elements.
exactly. It's not the particular arrangement. He's the
For
arranger
everything of the song.
on
That's-
any
that's
arrangement.
interesting.
Well, I thought that it came out of the publisher's share. that
No,
12%
no.
Comes out of the
composer's share.
So then
And
it couldn't happen in the United States then, because you can't give away the composer's share.
The composer
of that
could.
skip.
you can
Not the composer.
yeah, you can
Composer
share
could.
your composer share at any percentage with someone else.
But then you just become a co-composer.
Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
yeah. And in that sense, what Jay, to your comment, yes, and it only can be at the first time that piece is registered. Then
Right.
the arranger get a 12 piece, even if it's his arrangement or not.
Okay.
But we have like a little clip we want to play.
A tisk is a task.
Thank you, Milton Nelson, for assembling this. And by the
Nice
way,
job.
at this point, would like to thank the people who put this event together, Milton Nelson and Jeannie. Thank you very much. Yeah, this is just a compilation, and probably the list goes on and on. One example, famous example that was missing in that montage is "Singing in the Rain," where the intro phrase "dee dee 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 dee" is not part of the composition.
Right.
It is, John? Oh, I'm wrong? Well, never mind then.
Never mind then.
Later Above Ground competition in 1929
Has that in? Okay, well then I rest my
But
case.
the Green Party's trying to take it out
Thank
again.
you, John.
Green Party.
I heard it somewhere differently, but then again, so many rumors and legends and
So many elements. He adapted it from
okay.
You know,
it is in the original song.
Right.
Two of those tracks were arranged by their composer.
Two of those. I suspected that, yeah.
Van Alexander, Ticket Fantastic, and Diodato, Celebration.
Yes.
They
Yeah.
both wrote the song and you wrote it.
No, but
No,
with that, actually, I would like to turn it
I knew you'd know
over.
everything.
you know,
Actually, I would like to open this up for questions.
can I just say something? Me over
who-
here,
who-
wiping
yeah?
up the rear on this side.
Jeff.
Jeff?
Yeah. You know, I still think there's hope for everything that we've been saying, especially in R&B and hip-hop music, because I've noticed that on popular R&B and hip-hop artists, there's, 7 producers listed and 14 songwriters, and any assortment of other individuals are getting credit for these songs. I'm sure that an
Lots
arranger...
of cousins and brothers, and that's what I deal with.
What?
Lots of family members I
Right.
deal with.
So I'm certain an arranger snuck in there.
Yeah.
Often also, it's a question of timing, too, because
Oh, yeah.
when the song takes shape, if the arranger is in from the beginning, then there's absolutely no question the
Yeah.
contribution, and therefore the copyright is shared, at least in my world.
I want to ask one question. When you invited that lady in, and she said, "Look, I'm going to be doing part of this song. I'd like to have a part of the song." Were you receptive to that?
Totally.
Well, you're like the exception to the rule.
Yeah, really you are.
Well, from where I come from, it doesn't necessarily take a village, but it takes a team. And that was, I did that many, many years ago when it wasn't really a part of an arrangement. It was an experiment.
Right.
And so
Right.
that what I was trying to do was to create a level of interest in a song where it was actually kind of a boring, and I needed something to pump it up, and that was a very critical component. And when she said, "Do you think I could get a piece of the song?" There's no reason. Yeah, I mean,
Right on.
it's a small world, and we have to take care of each other.
Absolutely. You're right.
Very nice.
So if I see lots of hands, if you could come forward and use that microphone here, that podium, and ask a question, then everyone could hear it.
Hey, Chris?
Yes.
There's, while they're
Yes.
going to the lectern, just in case to hope that we're not feeling like totally hopeless we arrangers in the room, that we somehow will become remunerated for the work that we put into to it. Notwithstanding Jay's comments about the union, and I want to say that to the extent that you can have a union contract with an orchestration or an arrangement, or in this case an orchestration, it really helps to have your piece on the books, and to get that the special payments and the pension and all of that, the reuse when a piece of music that you write for a recording gets used on a film. At least you have that piece of the master that will stay with you throughout your career, and hopefully all the work that you do build somewhat of a nice taste for yourself.
Yes.
And at least if you can't get a taste of the copyright, at least you can get part of the union contract master, and that's really something that we can do that right now, regardless of what happens with Pharrell and his
That is very true. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's it from me.
Hi, good evening. My name is Oscar Hernandez, and I'm a pianist, arranger, producer, composer. And just to add to the kitty of things that have been done, and you've been subsequently screwed over, to lack of a better word. About 20 years ago in New York, I was called to do a commercial, a theme song for what we thought was a pilot for a TV show. It was for cable, and we didn't know exactly what it was, but I contracted the date. I played piano. I played the vibe solo on it. It was a theme for Sex and the City. And I got to tell you that if I made $1,200 in total for that work is a lot. So where does that stand in terms of, like, this is now a song that's gone into syndication all over the world. It's played. That theme song is heard all over the world. I mean, there's no doubt. I've traveled all over the world. You hear it, and it's popular. So that's along the lines of, I think, Don and Richard's, right? Same thing. When you hear the theme song of what it was now, the arranger, or the composer who arranged the song was Donald Cuomo, actually, who called me in and said, hey, I want this type of feel. You know, I know that you're excellent in what you do. Call the musicians, get the musicians that you want. And he had a kind of a sketch of the arrangement. But actually, we made it come to life in terms of what that theme song is. And all the solos that were improvised were the guys who were on the date. That's a prime example, even more so than even some of the other stuff you were talking about. So where do we, Jay, I'll ask you. Do I got a leg to stand on?
Not after the fact.
No, not after the fact. And this is that's another point I want to make, that at that time, we had no idea what it was. We had no clue, and actually I could say that 802 solos down the river in terms of the contract that we signed, because there should have definitely been some provision there. Had this now reached the level of success that it subsequently got, that we'd be entitled to some piece of the pie, something. You know what I'm saying? So.
Was it not done with an 802 AFM?
It was done. Yeah, it was done through an 802 contract. This is what I'm saying. We were with 802, and they said, well, this is, we don't know what it is. It's just a theme for cable. It's cable at the time. Cable was just beginning to become popular, kind of. It wasn't really network TV. And we said, okay, had no idea what it was going to be. It became a huge, mega success, after the fact. So don't you think that there should be some type of provision set in place for something that then has the incredible success that has to atone or somehow make up, give people a piece of the pie of what they're due?
Yeah, the problem with asking for it at the time or at the session is, as you pointed out, you never know. Sometimes these things become a success where you least expect it. Like in your case, the session, you were called in just to do a little theme for a cable show, and you never expected to blow up that huge. So there's a point when is the right time to ask, and as Jay said, you have to ask right at the beginning if you want to be a co-composer on it.
Yeah,
but your question is if.
That's a moot point. You're bringing up a point that doesn't make any sense, because you're not going to ask at that point. You don't know what it is.
Exactly,
right?
That's what I mean.
So how am I going to ask? I don't have a leg to stand on to ask for anything at that point. I'm
You
talking
need a
about
lawyer.
after the fact. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So you do get a lawyer, but the fact of the matter is, not everybody can afford the lawyer unless they work on a contingency basis. So it all comes down to economics, and what this great country is about is money, and
It's not a question of having a lawyer or anything else of that nature. The arrangers, the problem is that the custom has been, unfortunately, very unfortunately, and it's not until relatively recently arrangers have said, wait a minute, what about me? Which they probably should have said a long time ago. And it's an unfortunate custom that has arisen, that the arranger is cut out of this, particularly all these things you see here. Do remember that Pictures at an Exhibition, Ravel is the one who arranged it and orchestrated it. It was written by Mussorgsky. And what you hear is the Ravel. But the arrangers themselves need to step up and do it, because nobody's going to do it for you. It's got to be the arrangers got to step up and try and organize themselves to this thing and make a case for it. The case is reasonable. It's right. You could put out all these examples that you played here.
Yeah,
and
but
plus
you know that's
more.
not going to happen. As Vince said, he said it perfectly. You're not going to ask at that point because you have no leg to stand on, and you won't get the job like they've all said. They won't call you back. So I'm saying
That's
that
the
after the fact, there should be something in place to actually make up for something that's now made millions and billions of dollars, whatever it is, to say, hey, we owe, whatever it is.
I can't imagine that there would be any corporate concern, publishing company
No,
that would say, well, if
unfortunately
we make
not,
money
but,
on it, then you're in.
No, but I mean, the truth of the matter is, how do you rectify a situation like that? There's got to be something in place in terms of the union. I don't know what it is, but looking back, and I've let it go. I mean, that's not. I'm not.
Right.
I don't have any bitterness or whatever. I'm fine with it.
I think you can only be consoled with the fact that you played on Sex and the City, and that you could get dates with that information.
Or you could get sex.
That was good.
Quick question.
Hi.
Assuming that a composer does bring a arranger in on the copyright, like they do on, as you were saying, in hip hop and R&B, when it comes to licensing, does everybody have to sign off on it?
Yes.
Yes.
No.
Oh, all the writer. I think Jay was going to qualify that, but I
Yes.
mean, when I license a song, the publisher or the person that owns it is representing they own that. We make sure we get 100%. If sometimes it's over 100%, we'll agree to bank it, put it in a bank, and then people can fight it out later if that's the agreement. But whatever we're being told who represents, we have to have a piece of paper on every single writer that's represented that has a piece of that song.
Okay. Under the Copyright Act, under the copyright law, any co-writer can grant a non-exclusive license for 100% of the song. They're obligated to then make sure that the other people are paid, whether they collect it or not. An exclusive license, you need all of the co-authors to sign.
Nice.
That's how we find out who hates each
What would
other.
it take to have one person be able to grant an exclusive?
No, one person cannot, unless the parties agree, unless the parties have an agreement amongst them that says, okay, you, Sam, can go ahead and license on all of our behalf.
Is that what the administration agreement is?
Yes,
Thank
that'd be an administration agreement, that's correct.
John Altman.
Yeah.
I was actually just going to tell a quick story about something Richard mentioned, which was always look on the bright side of life. From
Which you're
Life
the
of
arranger
Brian,
of.
which I orchestrated, whistled on, arranged, conducted, and set all the chord changes to, apart from anything else. It's just that a few years ago, Eric Idle said to me, do you get any royalties from the bright side of life? And I didn't quite know how to answer him, because if I said yes, he might take them away. But if I said no, he might be disappointed because he decided to cut me in as the writer. So that was an instance where something that I made a contribution to was suddenly being brought up as a possible instance of, and I'm still not quite sure, because I am listed as co-composer on some of the paperwork. But I'm still not sure whether I'm receiving royalties or not. And I'm not sure whether I should be querying whether I am or whether I'm not.
Yes, you should be querying.
Yes, it's a very strange situation, because it's made a lot of money over the years for something.
You know,
For you?
sometimes musicians are their own worst enemies. They don't follow through. They don't go after what they're entitled to. And it sounds like if you're credited as, you should be going after. You should be asking questions.
Maybe I will now.
I think you should. I think you
Definitely,
should.
John.
Merry Christmas.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
This ruling concerned me as a producer and arranger if I'm writing a song or working with an artist who's recording a song, and in part of the song, they want to add to their arrangement or the end of the tag of the coda a deliberate homage to a previous song in the arrangement. Like, for instance, a friend of mine mentioned a song that I'd written that I recorded, where at the end of it, I quoted the end of a Beatles in the end with ahs and the whole orchestra hitting the whole thing. I'd never worried about that because for me, lots of music that I listen to is like tributes to other things in its arrangement or in its style, even though it's a modern tune on a new album or something. And this concerned me because this court decision would imply that I ripped off that song by putting a piece of it, re-recording with new musicians, with slightly not going to be identical. And the way you're defining it or they're defining it is the composer of a song owns the arrangement as well, which is actually interesting in this case because George Martin did all of that stuff, but he was never listed as a composer in any of the Beatles songs.
No.
So he never got a piece. He'd get a producer piece or something like that.
No, but if you're copying copyrightable elements from another work, that's copyright infringement.
But and I understand that, but the fact is, especially in rock music, for decades now, you hear quotes, you hear homages to things. There's whole albums by bands where they're sounding like the Beach Boys for 3 songs, or they're sounding like Queen for 3 songs, or the Beatles for entire songs. How many albums are re-recordings of new songs that sound like the Beatles? And I've never heard of those other guys going after them.
Well,
and now
some people do and some people don't. But the law is that if you copyright a substantial portion of another song, that doesn't mean in bulk. That means in quality. Okay, so if I copy the first 4 notes of Beethoven's Fifth, that's copyright infringement. Okay. On the other hand, you could copy parts of songs that are not substantive to that song, and you're probably okay. But if you take a recognizable known portion of another song and you put it in your song, that's copyright infringement.
But if you just instead of using the first 4 songs of Beethoven's Fifth, you just orchestrated the strings in the style of Beethoven, you obviously are.
Well, if you do it in the style of Beethoven, but you don't need to use those notes.
But that's not necessarily what the jury thought this time, because
well,
there was
but
a feel.
That's why this case
not,
was so special.
Yeah.
It was a jury decision, not a legal decision.
Right. And it's under appeal, so we still don't know in the final.
We don't know the final. It'll be very fascinating to find out what the appellate court says on this, because they're going to have to make a ruling. And I don't know which way they're going to go, whether they're going to say that the jury instructions were wrong, because the jury are fact finders. They're fact finders. They're not legal finders, okay? They find on facts. But if they've been instructed improperly as to what the facts are, then they would be reversed. So that's the element that I don't know.
So we just have to kind of just all wait right now and just see how that.
We have to wait and see what comes down, what the appellate court decides. That's when it'll become really interesting.
Okay, well, I have a tedious follow-up question for Jay, pursuant to your thing. If I were hired by Chris Walden to do an arrangement for Chris's new album, and for Warner Brothers, and inside of the arrangement, I quote the first 4 notes of Beethoven 5, and the record comes out and it's a big smash, and Chris is a worldwide sensation, like he is anyway.
I could never afford you anyway to begin with, but
and then the Sissy Beethoven comes back, the Beethoven estate, and they want to sue us for using this. Since the first 4 notes of Beethoven 5 is not part of the sheet music of the song, but is part of the master recording, is it not that it's going to be Warner Brothers being sued because they have the copyright to the masters and not the arranger?
No, the arranger would be sued too or the person who put the record down, because that's called copyright infringement. However, you're lucky because Beethoven is in public domain at this point. But in any event, there is such a thing as fair use. That's another whole concept. And fair use can be all over the place. You're allowed to use certain things under certain conditions. The more commercial the project is, the less you can use quote from something else. If you're writing a news article, you can quote whole sections of music or whole sections of a book. If you're a news article, if you're writing a news article. So it all depends on what you're doing on fair use. Is it taken away from the original? Is it affecting the marketplace of the original? Those are a lot of questions that are asked. But when you take a substantial portion of copyrighted material, qualitatively, not quantitatively, qualitatively, then it can be copyright infringement.
I think this actually has raised an issue that I think is worth talking about, which is the way making records has changed, especially in popular music, in the last 25 years. Because of the business changes that took place in the 90s, the way records are made now is very different from the way records were made in the 60s or 70s or even 80s.
Yeah.
In those days, I used to walk into the studio and they'd say, let's create magic. Let's do something different. Wow, what can we come up with? Do something fabulous. Impress me. Suddenly in the 90s, it started to be, we want it to sound like this hit. Can you make it sound as much as possible like that hit? The reason that happened is multinational corporations took over a lot of the independent labels, and they started putting in people who were in A&R positions, but actually marketing people. And they started thinking like marketing people, and they didn't really understand artists, but they certainly understood marketing. Hey, Madonna's successful, get me 6 more of those girls like her. So nowadays, and that's why I love the way you produce records, because it's live and it's real people. But anyway, what happened also is the technology changed. And when the technology changed and the way record companies were structured changed, and the nature of what A&R men were looking for, which was hits, and copying other artists rather than creating completely original things. I mean, we didn't really have this problem so much, when you had the Beatles, and who were not like the Rolling Stones, who were not like The Who, and who were not like Marvin Gaye, and who were not like, I could go on and on. But suddenly you got the 90s when suddenly artists started sounding like each other because producers were walking in and demanding that the musicians make records which sounded like this current hit or that current hit, or let's pick an old hit and sound exactly like that.
That's
and
a good
now
point.
with the technology changing, where you can sample anything, you can reproduce the sound of anything, that's created this problem at this point where now, if the Marvin Gaye decision stands, then it would be problematical for the industry.
I'll tell you something further. There was a case some years ago of somebody doing a voice like Bette Midler. They sound like Bette Midler. A company approached Bette Midler to do this commercial. Bette Midler said no. So they found a voice. They found somebody else with a voice that sounded like Bette Midler, and they made the record. And Bette Midler won that case. Big judgment. Also there was another case with the guy with a very low, gravelly voice. I can't remember his name. Tom Waits, thank you. Same thing. Tom Waits sued on somebody who sounded like him intentionally, and he won a big case too.
Chuck.
I think the same thing happened with Morgan Freeman. They hired a guy who spoke just like Morgan Freeman for some politician, and he sued because. Hey, Charles Fernandez. One comment. I think the guy who used the 4 notes from Beethoven's Fifth could use the argument that he was actually using the first notes from Old MacDonald instead, because the same note. There were only 12 notes. Anyway, I just wanted to share another good guy story, because there are quite a few of them out there. When Jerry Freed was filming when he was scoring Roots, he would give cue sheet credit to his rhythm section members because they gave so much to the actual lines and the performance, and he's one of these guys who actually would give cue sheet credit to his players, which I thought was great. I wish more of that would happen.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks. Great.
Good point, Chuck.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jorge Bermudez. I'm a longtime percussionist in the industry.
Hi.
And it's really a treat to hear all these stories. The question I have, you probably won't have an answer for because you guys described exactly what happened to me. And I was doing a recording on BMG, on percussionists, and they told me to bring in half a dozen of my friends. The producer all of a sudden gets the breakdown and says, hey, why don't you guys just like do something? So I make up parts for everybody, and I've got a very famous Cuban percussionist there, Francisco Agavea. He starts singing, and we write this chant over the thing. It turns into 32 bars, and it's killing the song. It turns into the bridge of the song. And I'm kind of young, you know, and I'm like really excited about what happened, but I didn't do what my friend over there did and said, like, you know, I wrote something for your song and I get compensated, but I waited, but nobody said anything. And I was happy to get my check, but it was always one of those ones that you go, you know.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to take a little bit of liberty here. That first gentleman that I came with right here, Oscar Hernandez, he is one of the founding members of Spanish Harlem Orchestra. He's one of the greatest Latin piano players in the world right there. So you should be aware of him. He's a commodity in this town that many people don't know, but he worked with Ruben Blades for a long time. He's embarrassed, but he's my friend. And
well, thanks for pointing that out. Thank you.
Mr. Cooper, excuse me. Wanted to ask you, since you brought up the Bette Midler case, that was, I mean, from A to Z lawsuit, because it was infringement of people, the persona. The case that's gone on right now between the Marvin Gaye case that we're all talking about, and when you hear it, it's almost like they're going after the sound of it, and there's a difference between the sonic
correct
aspect of it versus the actual melodic content.
Right.
So, I mean, so these things happen a lot more quickly in the advertising world. Many times they try to get a tune, they go to the publisher, they got the rights, but they didn't get the master rights of the recording. And so my question is, if they win, how does this affect
What sound alikes you're talking about?
the sonics is there going to be a lot more lawsuits based on just the way things sound versus the actual?
Well, if a case comes down that way, I guess yes. But that would be very unfortunate because, as I say, it's not a copyright. Sound is not a copyrightable element up to this point, unless all of a sudden a court says sound. The court's going to have to say it, not a jury. A court's going to have to say, the appellate court's going to have to say that a feel or a sound is copyrightable. I don't think they're going to go that way. I hope I'm right because I can't see it because everybody sound is or style. How do you make that unique to one particular person? I don't see how you do that.
Well, no, I asked the question because you get into certain areas, especially in the advertising world, where make it sound like the 60s.
Right.
The 60s had a certain
right.
component of
Correct.
gear, complement that was used, and certain ways of recording. Go 70s. I mean, that's something that happens every day.
Yeah, or even sort of knockoffs. I mean, I did quite a lot of advertising music earlier in my career, and you were given like a Sinatra, Fly Me to the Moon. Write me a song that sounds like Fly Me to the Moon,
right.
but isn't.
That's what I do every day. That's what I ask for every day.
Yeah.
When that case came around, the one you're talking about, actually the product was forwarded.
Yeah,
I brought that into the business to a veritable stop.
I had that. It was a great incident. The producer wanted the work to sound like Ravel's Bolero. So then they played me what was finally done, and it was Ravel's Bolero. I said, you got to get rid of this. But it was amusing. It sounded like Ravel's Bolero.
One other question that I just have in the back of my mind, and filling out some copyright forms in the past, there's something like in the actual copyright application that addresses specific special arrangements of a certain work. They even have that in ASCAP, actually. So you went way out on the fringe on some tune. You still needed the license, but all of a sudden it becomes like a whole other entity. How derivative is that?
Well, you can do an arrangement. You can get a copyright of an arrangement of a public domain song.
Okay.
You can't do that. That's not only legal, but ASCAP and BMI will pay royalties on it. They won't pay full royalty, but they will pay a royalty on an arrangement of a public domain song.
Yes.
Very clearly.
Or an adaptation.
Yes.
Yes.
That's correct.
As long as it's PD.
Hi, I'm coming from a little different place. My name's Tim Emmons. Hello. I'm coming from a different place than some of the arrangers. I've worked as a musicologist, and since you brought up the Beethoven's Fifth example, what about this recent recording by Kanye West, where he took a substantial portion of Bach and just a direct quote, and then did a crossfade into an original composition that's definitely it's in the same key.
Well, Bach is in public domain.
So there's the only people that have any claim to it, that would be the mechanicals from this recording
Well,
with samples?
if they sample, remember there's two copyrights on a recording. There's a copyright in the song that's on the recording, and which is a C copyright, and then there's a copyright, which is a P copyright in the physical recording.
The master recording.
So if they sample another recording, and they've used a portion of another recording into this recording, that is that's sampling, and that's copyright infringement. In fact, I have a T-shirt at home that says "Sample, go to jail."
Great.
In any event, that's true. I do. So if you take another recording, that's copyright infringement too.
Unless they license it. And
Unless
what
they
about
license
the publisher of the physical sheet music from which the recording was made? Would they have any claim on that?
The
or is that
publisher of
include-
the sheet music? No, only the publisher of the music, not necessarily the sheet music.
So
It
only
could be a
the-
different publisher of the sheet music.
So only the recording that was sampled is
Well, no. If they sampled, you said a public domain song. So public domain, they have no copyright unless they have no copyright. Only the physical master. But if the song was also sampled, in other words, it's a copyrighted song, then there's violating two copyrights.
So that would apply to the Beethoven's Fifth as well?
No,
because-
not to Beethoven, because Beethoven's out of copyright.
Did Kanye use in the pre-existing recording?
I believe it was.
Oh, okay. Well, then he's infringing of the master recording right, but not on
Or
Bach.
unless he licensed it.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It may be they figured it out. I mean, a lot of times they'll make sure that it's done properly and legally before they put it out. Sometimes they don't.
Yeah, I just wondered about the nature of this classical quote rather than a pop music quote.
Well, you can quote classical all you want, but you can't sample another physical recording of it. In other words, I can't take the Chicago Symphony recording of Bach or Beethoven and use a portion of that Chicago Symphony recording. I can't do that.
If it's public domain.
Well, the song may be public domain, but the recording is probably
The recording's not. The recording is copyrighted. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Larry.
Hi. This brought up something because I wear a couple hats. So I compose,
You're not
orchestrate,
wearing a
arrange,
hat.
and produce videos. Because I produce videos of the shows that I also arrange, compose, but maybe don't conduct, maybe go out and then produce the video from outside in the audience. What about when you take a classical composition for, say, an opera singer?
A what?
For an opera singer?
Yeah.
Okay, and you make a derivative work, it's your complete new arrangement of a classical song or a Neapolitan operatic piece, and then you rehearse the musicians, you do the whole production, and then you record it and you make a DVD and it's being sold around the world. It's a derivative work of a public domain piece.
Right.
Are you the copyright owner?
Yes. Yes,
And
you are.
how do you register that?
You file with the Copyright Office, very simply.
So you send the
call it
DVD
derivative
in?
work. It must be, your arrangement must be original. You can't
Right.
use the original thing going way back to what Verdi wrote.
No, you just take the melody and then you write an arrangement.
Yeah, yeah.
For, might be a 10-piece band instead of a symphony orchestra.
You can do a copyright. You can do a copyright on the song, on the music that you've now created, and copyright on the recording of it.
Yeah, because I'm sure a lot of us write for live performances all the time, but sometimes they get captured, and then it becomes a recording.
Yeah, and you register that with the Library of Congress, and then you're entitled. And
You
so
can do it
he's-
as long as your arrangement is now you get into the arrangement. Is the arrangement original, or are you using the original Verdi work. That was, you can't do that. You've got to really take the melody and then create your new arrangement of it.
Yeah.
You
In
can't-
other words,
you
you'd
can't
have to
go ahead
send
and
in
copyright.
your chart.
You have to have a new chart.
Yeah.
Right, but remember that.
Maybe you have electric guitars and drums and bass, which were never in there, and maybe you have
Right, but if you just-
saxophone and flute and a violin and a cello. So
because you're using old crusty classical music doesn't mean that there's some form of copyright by the publisher of that music. And in talking about Verdi, and Puccini, Ricordi in Italy is very serious.
Da, 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 da. Sound familiar?
Right.
The Jeannie family sued his ass.
Right. Yeah, so, you have to be careful about your assumption that something is PD because it may
Yes.
actually, Boozy may have
A printed
Beethoven
edition.
5, printed edition, and you have to go to Boozy and Hawks and find out if you can do your guitar and drums on Beethoven 5 because they may say, I don't think so.
He's correct in this regard. If Shermer or Boozy Hawks or one of them went out and did a new arrangement and published a new arrangement, that arrangement is protected. That arrangement is protected, not the original melody, but the new arrangement can be protected. And so you have to be careful to avoid that. Your arrangement cannot use the elements from that arrangement.
right, it has to be unique.
Thank you. We take one more question, and then we get to our raffle.
Ooh.
Yes, that is raffle.
I'm back. Traditionally, how have ownership rights worked with jazz recording records where a number of people are improvising solos? How has that traditionally been handled as far as who owns what?
Well, since an improvised solo, and in many cases, they're improvising over a jazz standard or a piece of music that was already there before. For example, if rhythm changes was like Gershwin. So it's always George Gershwin composition, no matter who solos over it.
Or they rewrite it, like How High the Moon. What's the other version of the
Ornithology.
Ornithology.
Charlie Parker.
Yeah.
But you're talking about the actual improvised solos. Yeah, but traditionally, the record companies have, in the old days, here's your $10, thanks for the master, and see you later. And we own everything, which is parenthetically why some record companies are still afloat because they have amassed this huge catalog of totally free money for them, because they don't owe anybody who played on the record anything. They pay
Including
them
the
off
main
and they
artist who they never paid anyway.
Talk about moral responsibility, and that's tragic, but that's the way it is.
Yeah.
The other side of this that I think is a little bit unfair is that when I know a lot of people who have transcribed solos for an educational book, and the publishers refused to publish the solos because they said, well, the solos are actually owned by the original copyright holder, and it's going to cost us too much money to do that book. Now, I would have thought that was included in fair use, and my book, which, by the way, is going to be for sale on that table back there, I've got 222 musical examples which I transcribed, and I couldn't get any publisher to take the book because they said, we'll never be able to afford paying all the copyright holders of the songs, but I didn't transcribe the melodies or the lyrics. I transcribed the brass lines, the string lines, the voicings, and finally I published it myself under the fair use agreement, and if anybody would like to sue me, I'm ready for them.
Great.
Okay.
Milton.
Ready for ornithology?
This is just an interesting concept I brought up before, but
okay.
Oh, that's nice.
So we were just singing ornithology.
Oh, that's a good song. Anyway, say like when they use a Nelson Riddle arrangement on American Idol or something, even though they're not using the physical piece of paper that he submitted under the original union contract, they're reusing that arrangement even though it was transcribed by ear. Shouldn't he get a repayment under the musicians union contract?
You would think so.
But
Exactly.
But the only reason they're not paying is because it's not the physical piece of paper. It's because somebody else is transcribing it. Like if you did that with the script and started writing down the script and said, oh, well, this wasn't the original piece of script. That was from this movie, and we're just going to use it again.
I think you'd probably need Jay to go chase them down.
Okay.
because
Anyway,
Yeah.
I just want to throw out that
No, but it's a good
concept.
point, and it's
That's,
probably a gray area.
I think the guys upstairs would probably
Yeah.
need to chase
Yes.
that kind of thing down.
Yeah.
Because it makes sense to me that Nelson Riddle should get something from that.
Yeah.
Well,
But
thank you.
I want you to know Frank Sinatra was interviewed, and he said yes, that the credit, Nelson Riddle's credit, was very important, and that he couldn't have done it without those guys.
Exactly. He said that he would give 50 to 60% of the credit for his success to his arrangers.
But AF of M doesn't pay reuse for anything prior to 1960.
Who does
Oh,
it?
yeah. AFM.
AFM.
Really?
Well, that was a downer.
So we need to
Wrap up.
but I invite you to join us for refreshments and discussion, informal discussion. And if you're not a member of ASMAC, I hope you'll consider becoming a member of ASMAC. We have some brochures back there. So we have 2 gift packages here.
Do it, Jay.
What's that?
Do it.
Pull two names.
2 names.
Peake.
Yeah.
Oscar,
Don't forget the
I think you were.
Oscar?
Oscar.
Yay.
And Tony, let's see. I don't know what it says.
Someone, Tony?
Can't read the last name. G? No?
Oh, Tony. Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you so much, my panelists, for coming and participating in this really interesting, lively discussion. Again, Jeff Weber, Richard Niles, Don Peake, Julia Michels, Vince Mendoza, and Jay Cooper. Thank you. And thank you all for coming. Our next masterclass is with Gordon Goodwin this coming Saturday. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Cheers.